Good day, everyone, and welcome to Leadership Synergized, where we have a chance to talk to special people, individuals who come out and serve others and put value where it needs to be placed in our world as they work to expand and multiply leaders and positivity throughout our life and society. And I'm very pleased to bring back a very dear friend of mine, Dr. Randy Mills. Dr. Mills recently wrote a book about Larry Bird's high school days on the basketball court called As If by Magic. Dr. Mills, my friend, welcome back. It's been more than 6 months now. A lot of things have taken place, but it's great to see you, my friend.
Time marches on.
Yes, it does. And for you, I'm sure it's been kind of like a whirlwind.
I had an interview the other day where a guy out in Denver was asking me in a podcast. Uh, he said, "Give me your take on Indiana State, as a place for Larry to go." And I said, "Well, it was the fit. Larry needed that fit. That was a part of his limitation. He could not go to an IU. He wasn't going to be able to make it there, but Indiana was just a really sweet spot, and they made room for him. Of course, there were a lot of people there from Springs Valley, and he roomed with them, and he basically just hung out with his Springs Valley buddies during that time. But he was at home, and he needed that sense of safety and home. But in giving an analysis of Indiana State, and you may have some comments about this, Kevin, except for Larry's time there, before and after, it's not, anything to write home about. I mean, they were okay, and so many of those smaller schools are. But up until that recent run, and then they all went to St. Louis, the Pelicans, that's been their heyday. Now, when they were in Division II, they won a national tournament, were runners up, I think, a couple of times. But they went to Division I about the time that Larry came aboard. But yeah, there was that.
Well, and when it was Indiana State Teachers College, they actually let a coach go that a lot of people know about, right? The great John Wooden,
Yes, yes.
in that aspect. And Coach Wooden ended up with his prowess and legacy in UCLA in that setting. But, when you think about, Indiana State basketball, they've had some good moments. I mean, Larry's younger brother, Eddie, went and played there, and I think they had some winning years, but nothing like what they had with Larry. A year or two ago, you alluded to, to the team that was basically, I think, maybe part of the last four out or a grouping that almost made the NC2A tournament and then went to the NIT semifinals, final game period in that window. But really haven't been able to repeat what they had in the 1979 aspect. And probably, don't you think, Dr. Mills, somewhat unfair to expect that to have continued and carried on, just
Oh,
given
yes. Yeah.
it was a point in time that comes around once in a true lifetime with Larry and with it. While Larry brought the talent, the court sense, the mind awareness, the ability to, as you said, to anticipate, to put the ball behind the defender's head, let him drop off, and then nail a shot or bounce it between somebody's leg or tap a pass in that setting. That's so rare and probably just unfair to anticipate that university to have been able to continue that for a long period of time.
So a former Indiana State coach, friend of mine, Dave Shellhouse,
Yeah.
told me a story because he followed Hodges.
Oh yeah, Bill
And
Hodges was coach Larry's senior year when Bob King had some health issues.
yes, yes. And was it just his senior year? Was it junior, senior year? I guess it was his senior year,
I
wasn't
think
it?
it could have applied in both of those years
Yeah.
to some
I
degree
think
there,
maybe he
Dr.
was
Mills.
coming in Larry's junior year. But anyway, after Larry left, Bill didn't hang around too long. They just didn't. They weren't going to recapture that for a while.
Yeah.
But Coach Shellhouse indicated to me that he thought that when they moved to Division I, they went into too tough of a conference. That they'd been better off if they had found another conference maybe where they could have won it and then gotten out of there to go to the NCAA. But they were stuck with that for a while, and that was Dave's cut on it. And I suspect there was truth to that. So
The Missouri Valley Conference, to your point, the Drakes, the Bradleys, the Illinois States, the Wichita
Creighton,
States at the time. There was some good basketball. New Mexico State, I don't know if you recall or not, but New Mexico State in the 79s, where Bob Heaton had to bank in a half-court shot.
yes,
Bob Heaton, later a state representative here in the state of Indiana, and a talented player in his own right with the Clay City Hills, who who actually was in the semi-state in Evansville's old Roberts Stadium in 1974 when Larry and his team didn't quite make it that far in that regard. So there was a lot of competition, especially when you went on the road in that conference during that era.
So I have a question for you, Kevin, because I know you were at that regional game where Bedford beat
Hmm.
Springs Valley, and Springs Valley had what, a 5-point lead with about 2 minutes to go, and they never scored again. Would they have done very well if they'd gone on the semi-state? Because Bossy would have been there, and the Eels can't think who the
It was Evansville, Boise, Bedford, and Jeffersonville,
okay,
and with
but
Clay City that year.
yeah, that still would have been tough depending on who they would have drawn.
It would have been a tough semi-state. Of course, here we talk about projecting backwards again, right? In that
Yeah,
setting. So, I'm a 14-year-old sitting there, keeping stats. All theoretical, right? Who knows? My belief is the semi-state would have been kind of a refreshing experience for Larry and his team because it would have been against teams that, you know, Indiana was still a one-class system back in
yes,
1974. They were actually what, 24 years, 23 years away from moving to the four-class system they have now. And the 19 was a 1997, 98 year for the class system. It would have been a small school versus a big school mentality window. And if you
classic.
go back 5 years from Larry's senior year in 1974, Jim Jones had that big front line, the Bob Lanes, Dan Nobles, and they
Yes,
upset state-ranked New Albany, in that regional semifinal before losing to Bedford North Lawrence by 10 points that night, or to
and
Bedford at the
yeah,
time, the
a
Bedford
game is
Stonecutters. They weren't Bedford North Lawrence. My view is whether or not they would have won the semi-state, I think the Springs Valley team with Larry that year would have really challenged for that semi-state title. And going into that Washington regional, there were two things that really worked against Springs Valley. One was the view that they wanted to get back at Lagodi from that regular season
yes.
game, and Lagodi never made the final. So there was that anticipation of playing Lagodi in the regional final that never happened. And there was a bit, in my viewpoint, of somewhat of overlooking the team they were playing that night, Bedford.
Well,
Not purposefully,
yeah,
but by overlooking that team to the degree they did. Dr. Mills, my recollection was we were down 55-48 with roughly two, or we were up 55-48, Springs Valley was, with 2.5 minutes to go or so, and never scored another point, lost 58-55. I think that's when the fatigue and the overlooking aspect of Bedford really being good finally wore the team out. Because, they had a tough second half against Jasper earlier in the day
yes,
that day. But to
and
your
Bed
question, not to linger, I think Springs Valley could have surprised and went on to the state. Whether or not they would have beat Bob Dilly and the Fort Wayne Northrop team, who was upstart that year or not, remains to be seen, or would have remained to have been seen. But yeah, just projecting back, I think we would have had a good chance that year with Larry and that team to have perhaps competed right up to the end for that semi-state crown, if not won it.
can you imagine Larry being unfettered in those semi-state games against Bossy there and whoever
Oh,
they would have played at Roberts Stadium? Man, he would have been there, wouldn't he? I mean, there'd been no question of who the best player was and all that stuff. All that got lost when he didn't go in. But it might have been to his advantage. It got him to Indiana State. You bring up something in my mind too, and you brought it up really at the beginning. These stories uh, that we tell and value and mean so much to us. And this, where does Larry Bird fit into the picture today? Question. I was watching a clip on Michael Jordan talking about Larry Bird, and he says, he's in my top five. I think he's in most players' top fives that played against Larry back during those days. And that's amazing when you think about this guy's consistently in the top five and that kind of thinking. That's less so with probably certainly younger people that talk about those kinds of things. And some people say, well, who's Larry Bird? But I think what we're looking at here is the putting to sleep of a generation
mm.
and a time when basketball was different than it is now. And that just happens. And we're I guess it's kind of a last hurrah for what I call that golden age of in high school basketball of a single class.
Mm.
Not that there's not benefits to more than one class, and just the style and the way the game was played in terms of teamwork and passing and getting a thrill out of hitting an open guy. I still, and I guess it's being a part of that generation. When I go see my grandkids play or any kind of girls basketball, whatever nowadays, I love seeing a pass made out of nowhere to somebody under the basket,
Mm.
and they hit kind of like how Purdue got unfortunately got beat the other
Yeah.
night. What that was classic. That was a junior high play under the basket. Did you see that game where
I did. And I'm wondering
Houston?
where, I'm not, look, I love Matt Painter. I think he's a rare coach in today's game that really gets the most out of the players, and there's still that pride of playing for the university. So I'm not questioning him, but you just got, how do you not guard the out of bounds player on that piece, right? Or where did that defender come from that lost him, so to speak, to allow him to step back in?
It's the beauty, though. It's the beauty of basketball that happens. That it's not always about these amazing plays. It's about when we're not looking. And Larry had those nights too. That's
Yeah.
another thing that I emphasize in the book, that Larry Larry had to work at becoming that, and he didn't win every game. He wasn't this. You see those clips, and those clips are always bad news when it comes to understanding what we're talking about, because it shows a guy not making any mistakes. So always,
Yeah.
and you think, well, boy, he plays the whole game like that. I remember seeing, and we may have talked about this before, but I had was watching a show of Larry's three best games,
Mm.
and the last one was against the Trailblazers, and Trailblazers was the team. Boston was not as good as they had been, and Larry was getting older. I was watching that game, and Larry was making mistakes. He wasn't hitting all his shots like you would expect him to. He made some defensive mistakes. The Trailblazers were just they were just pounding on him, and so Larry's still grinding. Boston's still grinding, and you see, boy, they're not going to win, and they get back and they hang in and hang in and hang in, and finally they need a last second shot, 3-point shot to tie the game at the end of regulation. And Larry gets that shot. He has to, when he's at the 3-point line, he stutters with his feet because he's trying to stay back, but his momentum's leaving him forward. So when he releases the ball, he's in the air behind the 3-point line. He comes down just on the other side of it, and they count it as a 3-pointer, ties the game. And then he hits another shot, maybe to win that overtime, or maybe it went another overtime. But anyway, they ended up winning it. And you realize, I think Larry had 41 points and so many rebounds. That's how Larry did it. It was a grind. And he was probably the best grinder of all those players. He just never stopped. I mean, he'd run into a wall no matter how tired he was.
As you tell that story on the Portland Trailblazer game late in his career, I'm flashing back to, the Indiana Pacer game where his head hits the floor, whether he had a concussion, whether he broken jaw, whatever. You've heard stories repeat, come out in that regard. He had to leave the game. I think this is happening in the first half, and you don't know if he's coming back. And the Pacers had Chuck Person, some other young players. Reggie Miller may have even been with them at that time. I can't recall. But they were a good ball club. And then Larry comes out of the tunnel early in the second half and just kind of takes over in that regard. And this is late in his career. And I just consider those type of settings really embody Larry's performances or Larry's development and what he brought. It was solid work ethic. It was nothing white collar sitting in a corner office development at all. It was all work and give everything I've got type of mentality and I'm not criticizing. The game has changed. Life, society has changed so much. And, even back to our point about, the small school, big school scenario, Dr. Mills, and this isn't being critical. Look, I'm a one class person, and I love that the state of Kentucky still brings their Sweet 16 together in that regard. I love that. But when you kind of separate and make it more less likely that you're going to have those iconic opportunities, whether you're successful or not, all you want's the ball and a chance to do it, right? Larry, it's all he ever wanted was give me the ball and I'll take care of it. And if it doesn't go in, I'll take, I'll wear it. I'll wear the finger pointing on me. And it's so it's so much changed, it being life and society wanting to take accountability and being responsible, but the same way in the game of basketball today, that has really shifted. But those moments with Portland, the Indiana Pacer flashback I just mentioned, those I think really embody Larry's career and what he brought to the game of basketball.
Let me build on what you've said here, Kevin. I think you've touched upon two other things that it occurs to me now. One is that Larry expected everybody else on the team to do well.
Mm.
And he did. He encouraged them and he got after them. And he was always that force that when he walked in, you could just feel that glow catching other people. And they were good. The people he played with were good. But I think, and that's the other thing I'm going to say, Larry made other people better. You don't see that today with okay, I'm going to shoot and score. That's it. You don't see that they're not making anybody else better. They're not, the expectation is different. And you're right that we live in a different era. We think in a different way. I just wonder if those attributes that we've been speaking about, hard work, working as a team to make each other better, expecting everybody to do well and helping them to do well, and maybe even calling them to task when they don't. I wonder in a leadership kind of thing if we'll ever see a time when that will return. Do you think that's faded some in the leadership world?
I think it has. I think it has, in particular, in some of those traditional aspects of what we've always looked at in our society as leaders. Obviously, I'm not, you and I have spoke about this, it's natural to expect those who lead our country or to be global, who are leading countries around the world. It's a natural look-see when it comes to leadership. We just anticipate they are the best of the best in that regard. But some of the quality of leadership we get sometimes doesn't resonate with me, at least in that setting. I think the ground level aspect and struggles as well in leadership. We've almost become so transactional in everything we do. We've got to have the key performance indicators. We got to deliver on time and measure this. We've got to attain this level. We've got to pay this amount of money. The Steve Alford press conference recently, when he talks about the negative impact from his viewpoint of how maybe it's not a negative impact. Maybe it's just my connotation in that regard, but how NIL has changed the game. And I think, Steve talked about, Coach Alford talked about, I used to go into the living room and parents would ask me, what was their son going to get out of coming to our university? How would they grow? What education would they get? How would they be? Now it's how much am I going to make? What are you going to pay me? And these are even individuals being recruited who haven't proven themselves yet at the college level. And really, that's our society in many ways today. It's our society wants it now. It's, back in the day to have chocolate milk, you and I had to put some powdered stuff in our white milk, right? And stir it up real good to get it there in that aspect. And, it's kind of the microwave society. But I do think it gets into leadership aspect. We want to almost go from level one to the very top level of leadership overnight. And we've lost the body of work impact. And I really think players like Larry Bird, Bill Russell, Jerry West, so many, Michael Jordan, Magic, Magic and Michael looked so smooth at times. You didn't think about them ever having to work, but I believe they had the same work ethic Larry did.
Yes. Yeah.
Their games were different and expectations were different. And I think they had the same expectation as Larry did of his teammates.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially Magic and some of the things that he has said in interviews and so forth, and reflecting about him and Larry, he talks about how they were so much alike.
Yeah.
When they got out on the floor. And Magic talked about, is it going to be Irvin or is it going to be Magic here? Because he understood those were two different parts. And one of them was just, he was going to kill you out there on the court. He was going to win that game. Well, that's Larry Bird too. So it was interesting to see those.
There was ice in the veins when they had to have it, right?
Yes, yes.
From the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you and I thank you for all you do.
Okay, sounds great, Kevin. Let's do this again.
God bless you, my brother. I love you and keep at it. And thank you all for joining Dr. Mills and I on this episode of Leadership Synergized. May your day be filled with love, God's grace, and guidance. Thank you.